close your eyes and listen to the full sleep story on our channel. Sweet dreams. Episode 13. The Carpenter Who Built Homes for Lonely Hearts. Part 1. The Forest That Whispered of Home. Morning sunlight filtered gently through the towering pine trees. Golden rays danced across the forest floor. The air carried the fresh scent of cedar, moss, and rain that had fallen sometime during the night. Ethan followed the winding woodland path. Behind him, Ashen Hollow slowly disappeared beyond the rolling hills. Its peaceful clock tower was no longer visible, yet somehow, its quiet rhythm still echoed inside his heart. Tick, 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 not from a clock, but from the memories he now carried. His backpack rested comfortably upon his shoulders. Inside, every treasure from every journey remained carefully protected. The smooth river stone, the white seashell, the pressed lavender blossom, the tiny wooden windmill, the bottle of spring water, the cedar bookmark engraved with. Walk gently, listen deeply, the bronze key of quiet hearts, the morning bell, the silver bell bracelet, the golden ribbon, the wooden tree token, the journey bundle, the wildflower seed, the compass that pointed toward kindness, the blue sea glass, the amber sea glass, the bottle of white sand, Sophie's little paper boat, Captain's white feather, the silver compass that pointed to the center, Grace's lavender, the letter hidden inside the waiting violin, the smooth piece of maple wood, Oliver's notebook, the silver tuning fork engraved with. Find the note that brings peace, the old violin, the brass pocket sundial, the embroidered linen, the tiny bottle of golden sand, the notebook that remembered meaningful hours, the little brass gear, Lily's paper clock. None of them were heavy, yet together, they carried the quiet weight of gratitude. The forest grew deeper. Birdsong drifted through the tall branches. Somewhere nearby, a woodpecker tapped rhythmically against an old oak. Tap, tap, tap. Ethan smiled. It was the same gentle sound he had heard at the end of his last journey. He continued walking. The tapping became clearer, steadier, not hurried, patient, like someone shaping each piece of wood with great care. Around midday, the trees slowly opened into a wide forest clearing. Sunlight poured across a peaceful meadow filled with tiny white wildflowers. At the far edge of the clearing stood a small wooden village. Every cottage looked different. Some were built from warm cedar, others from pale oak. Some had ivy climbing across their walls. Others were surrounded by colorful gardens. No house looked grand, yet every one looked welcoming. Smoke curled lazily from stone chimneys. Children laughed as they carried little wooden birdhouses. An elderly woman painted a bright blue front door. A young father repaired a neighbor's fence while humming softly. The entire village seemed busy, yet no one appeared rushed. Near the entrance stood an old wooden sign. Its carved letters had weathered gently over many years. It read, "Welcome to Hearth Glen, where every door is built to open." Ethan paused. He read the words twice, then quietly stepped through the simple wooden gate. The village streets were lined with flowering cherry trees. Wooden benches rested beneath their branches. Tiny carved hearts decorated fence posts. Even the mailboxes had been lovingly shaped by hand. Everywhere Ethan looked, someone was building something. A bench, a cradle, a garden gate, a bookshelf. But no one worked alone. Neighbors handed one another tools. Children collected smooth stones. Grandparents offered quiet advice. It felt less like construction and more like cooperation. As Ethan walked through the village, the steady tapping returned. Tap, tap, tap. It came from a large open workshop near the center of the square. Unlike the others, its doors stood wide open. Anyone could walk inside. Above the entrance, a beautifully carved wooden sign gently swayed in the breeze. It read, "No one leaves without feeling welcome." Ethan smiled. Then, he stepped inside. The scent of freshly cut cedar filled the warm air. Sunlight streamed through high windows. Wood shavings curled across the floor like golden ribbons. Shelves held carefully crafted chairs, tables, rocking horses, bookshelves, birdhouses, and doors of every size. Near the back of the workshop, an elderly carpenter stood beside a long wooden bench. His silver hair caught the afternoon light. His hands were strong, yet every movement was wonderfully gentle. He was carving the shape of a tiny heart into the corner of a simple wooden chair. Not because anyone would notice, but because he believed even hidden places deserved kindness. He finished the final careful stroke. Only then did he look up. His warm brown eyes met Ethan's. A peaceful smile appeared beneath his neatly trimmed white beard. "Welcome," he said softly. "I've been saving an empty chair." Ethan blinked. "For me?" The old carpenter chuckled. "No, for whoever arrived needing it." He gently brushed the last cedar shavings from the chair, then looked at Ethan once more. "But today, I think that happens to be you." Outside, the forest breeze whispered through the open workshop doors. The rhythmic tapping finally came to rest, as though it had been patiently waiting for one more traveler to find a place that already felt like home. To be continued. Episode 13, The Carpenter Who Built Homes for Lonely Hearts. Part 2, The Chair No One Sat In. The workshop fell peacefully quiet. Tiny cedar shavings drifted slowly to the wooden floor. Sunlight poured through the tall windows. The scent of fresh pine and cedar filled every corner of the room. The elderly carpenter gently set down his carving knife. "I suppose introductions should come before conversations." He smiled warmly. "My name is Rowan." Ethan returned the smile. "I'm Ethan." Rowan nodded as though the name already felt familiar. "It's a pleasure to meet you." He motioned toward the chair he had just finished carving. "Please, sit." Ethan carefully lowered himself into the chair. It was surprisingly comfortable, not because of soft cushions, but because every curve seemed perfectly shaped for rest. Rowan noticed his expression. A chair should make a person forget they're sitting. He said, "If they notice the chair, I've done something wrong." Ethan laughed softly. "I've never thought about furniture that way." The old carpenter chuckled. "Most people don't." He picked up a small block of cedar. "But a home is built from hundreds of quiet details. The things no one notices are often the things that matter most." Ethan looked around the workshop. Every shelf, every table, every cabinet, every rocking chair. Each one had been crafted with extraordinary care. Then, his eyes settled upon something unusual. Near the far wall, beside a wide window overlooking the village, stood another chair, unlike the others. It was older. Its oak wood had darkened with time. The armrests had been polished smooth by countless hands. Yet something felt different. No tools rested upon it. No cushion covered its seat. No dust had gathered there. It looked cared for, yet unused. Ethan pointed toward it. That chair. No one sits there. Rowan's smile became quieter. They don't. Why? The old carpenter walked slowly across the workshop. He rested one gentle hand upon the worn wooden backrest. It belongs to anyone who hasn't arrived yet. Ethan frowned slightly. I don't understand. Rowan's eyes remained fixed on the empty chair. Many years ago, a traveler came through Hearth Glen. He stayed only one afternoon. He was tired, lonely, and certain that no place in the world still had room for him. The workshop grew wonderfully still. Outside, a robin landed upon the windowsill. Listening, I offered him tea. Rowan continued. And this chair, the old carpenter smiled softly. He rested for nearly an hour. We hardly spoke, but when he finally stood, he smiled, and before leaving, he said something I'll never forget. Rowan looked toward Ethan. Thank you for leaving space. Before you knew who would need it. The words lingered quietly in the warm afternoon air. Ethan looked again at the empty chair. Suddenly, it no longer seemed empty. It seemed hopeful. Rowan gently brushed invisible dust from its seat. So I made myself a promise. What promise? That no matter how busy life became, there would always be one chair, waiting for someone who needed to feel welcome. Ethan smiled. And has anyone else sat there? Oh yes. Rowan laughed kindly. A widow, a frightened little boy, a traveling teacher, a young mother, a musician, even a shepherd who had simply walked farther than expected. He paused. Each of them arrived believing. They were bothering someone. They left knowing. They belonged somewhere. The afternoon breeze drifted through the open doorway. The hanging wooden chimes outside answered with a soft melody. Clink, clink, clink. Just then, a little girl hurried into the workshop carrying a tiny wooden birdhouse. One side had come loose. Mr. Rowan, she called cheerfully. I think my birds are going to complain. Rowan laughed. Then we'd better repair their home. The little girl noticed Ethan. She smiled brightly. Hello, I'm Emma. Welcome to Hearth Glen. She looked toward the old chair by the window. You've seen the waiting chair. Ethan nodded. I have. Emma grinned. My grandmother says, it isn't waiting for strangers. It's waiting until strangers become friends. Rowan looked at her with quiet pride. I couldn't have said it better myself. Together, the three of them repaired the tiny birdhouse. No one hurried. No one worried about the passing hours. Outside, children laughed beneath the cherry trees. Neighbors built fences together. Someone whistled while planting flowers beside a cottage. Everywhere Ethan looked, people weren't simply building houses. They were building belonging. And as he glanced once more toward the waiting chair, he wondered if the strongest homes were never built with wood alone. Perhaps they were built, one welcome at a time. To be continued. Episode 13, The Carpenter Who Built Homes for Lonely Hearts. Part 3, The House with an Always Open Door. The little birdhouse was soon as good as new. Rowan carefully sanded its edges until they felt perfectly smooth. Emma painted the repaired corner with a tiny brush. When she finished, she held it proudly toward the sunlight. It looks even better now, she said. Rowan smiled. Sometimes repairs don't hide a story. They honor it. Emma nodded as though she had heard those words many times before. She thanked Rowan, waved cheerfully to Ethan. and skipped happily back toward the village square. The workshop grew quiet once again. Only the gentle sound of a hand plane gliding across cedar filled the room. Shoo, shoo, shoo. Ethan watched Rowan work. Every movement was slow, deliberate, patient. He never forced the wood. Instead, he seemed to listen to it. "You carve as though the wood is speaking," Ethan said. Rowan chuckled softly. "It is." Ethan smiled. "And what does it say?" The old carpenter ran his fingers gently across the grain. "It tells me where it has been." He pointed to a small knot in the cedar board. This tree stood against strong winds. His finger traced a faint curve in the grain. Here, it leaned towards sunlight. Then he smiled. "And this little mark, it reminds me that nothing in nature grows perfectly straight." Ethan looked more closely. The wood no longer seemed ordinary. It carried its own quiet history, just as people did. Rowan carefully placed the finished board on a nearby table. "Come, I'd like to show you something." They stepped outside into the warm afternoon sunshine. The village glowed beneath a clear blue sky. Flower boxes overflowed with bright blossoms. Children's laughter drifted through the streets. Fresh bread cooled upon windowsills. The scent of cedar mixed gently with blooming roses. Rowan led Ethan along a winding lane lined with cherry trees. Every cottage they passed looked unique. One had a round blue door. Another featured carved birds along its porch railing. A third displayed colorful quilts hanging in the windows. Yet despite their differences, they all shared one curious detail. Every front door stood slightly open, not wide enough for the wind to enter, just enough to say, "You are welcome." Ethan noticed it immediately. None of the doors are closed. Rowan smiled. "Not during the day. Is that a tradition?" "It has been, for longer than anyone remembers." They stopped before a cozy cottage covered in climbing ivy. Its wooden sign simply read, "The Welcome House." The front door stood open. Warm sunlight spilled across the threshold. Inside, an elderly woman arranged fresh flowers into a clay vase. She looked up. Her face brightened. "Rowan," she called warmly, "and you've brought a guest." The old carpenter nodded. "This is Ethan." The woman smiled as though greeting an old friend. "I'm Martha. Would you both care for tea?" She didn't ask whether they had time. She simply made room. Moments later, 3 steaming cups rested upon a round oak table. Fresh honey, warm bread, homemade berry jam. Nothing had been prepared in advance. Everything simply seemed ready to share. Ethan looked around. The cottage felt peaceful. A rocking chair rested beside the fireplace. Shelves overflowed with well-loved books. Tiny wooden toys decorated the mantel. On one wall hung dozens of small framed sketches. Each showed a different person standing in front of the same cottage. Travelers, families, children, old friends. Some smiled broadly. Others looked quietly relieved. Martha noticed Ethan studying them. Every visitor leaves behind a memory. She explained. "Who painted these?" "My husband," she said softly. "He believed a home becomes larger every time it welcomes someone." Rowan looked at one of the oldest sketches, a young couple standing beneath the same doorway. "That's you," Ethan said. Martha smiled. "Many years ago. And your husband?" She looked toward the rocking chair. "He passed away peacefully." Her smile remained gentle. But every traveler who sits at this table keeps a little of his welcome alive. Silence settled comfortably around them. Not heavy, Not sad, simply grateful. After tea, Martha wrapped 2 slices of warm bread in a linen cloth. She handed them to Ethan. For the road. He hesitated. I couldn't. She smiled before he finished. In Hearth Glen, we never ask whether someone deserves kindness. We simply offer it. Ethan accepted the bundle with both hands. Thank you. As they stepped back outside, the afternoon breeze gently nudged the open door. It moved only slightly, never closing completely. Ethan glanced back one last time. Rowan noticed. My father used to say. He smiled. A locked door protects a house. He paused. But an open heart is what makes it a home. The words lingered softly in Ethan's thoughts as they continued walking through the peaceful village. Every open doorway, every friendly wave, every quiet smile seemed to repeat the same gentle truth. Sometimes, the strongest walls were built to keep out the cold, but the strongest homes were built to let kindness in. To be continued. Episode 13. The Carpenter Who Built Homes for Lonely Hearts. Part 4. The Table That Always Had One More Place. The afternoon sun drifted gently across Hearth Glen. Long shadows stretched beneath the cherry trees. A light breeze carried the comforting scent of cedar, fresh bread, and blooming roses through the quiet streets. Ethan walked beside Rowan. Neither hurried. Neither felt the need to fill every moment with conversation. Sometimes, the kindest companion was simply someone willing to walk beside you. As they continued through the village, the sound of laughter floated from a nearby cottage. Warm, cheerful, inviting. Rowan smiled. I believe we've arrived just in time. For what? Ethan asked. The old carpenter pointed toward a cozy stone house at the end of the lane. Smoke curled gently from its chimney. Its flower garden overflowed with daisies, lavender, and sunflowers. Above the front porch hung a simple wooden sign. It read, "There is always room." The front door stood wide open. Through the windows, Ethan could see people gathered around a long wooden table. Some were young, some were old, some wore work aprons. Others carried travelers' backpacks. A few looked like they had only just arrived. Yet everyone smiled as though they had known one another for years. Rowan knocked softly against the open door frame, not because permission was needed, but out of respect. A cheerful voice answered from inside. "Come in." A middle-aged woman stepped forward. Her silver-streaked hair was tied neatly behind her head. A flower-dusted apron covered her simple blue dress. Her eyes sparkled with kindness. "Rowan," she said warmly, "and you've brought another guest." She turned toward Ethan. "I'm Eleanor. Welcome." Before Ethan could introduce himself, she gently placed another plate onto the long table, as though it had always belonged there. "You were expecting someone?" Ethan asked. Eleanor smiled. "No, we simply always prepare one extra place." Ethan looked around. Every chair was occupied, except one. It rested quietly at the far end of the table. A clean plate, a warm bowl of vegetable soup, fresh bread, a folded linen napkin, waiting, just as Rowan's empty chair had been waiting. Ethan smiled. "It seems this village likes to leave room for people." Rowan chuckled. "A home that has no empty place may someday discover it has no place for hope." Everyone gathered around the table, hands folded quietly, not in ceremony, but in gratitude. Eleanor spoke softly. "May this meal remind us that food fills the body, and welcome fills the heart." A gentle chorus answered, "Amen." The meal began. Warm soup, freshly baked bread, roasted vegetables, honey from nearby gardens. Nothing extravagant. Everything made with care. Conversation flowed gently. A traveling teacher shared stories from distant villages. An elderly shepherd described the first lambs of spring. Two children proudly explained how they had built a tiny bridge across a stream for ducks. No one interrupted. Everyone listened. Ethan noticed something unusual. Whenever someone finished speaking, no one rushed to tell a better story. They simply smiled, asked another question, and listened again. After a while, a soft knock echoed from the open doorway. Knock, knock. A young woman stood outside. She carried a small cloth bag over her shoulder. Her shoes were dusty from many miles of walking. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to interrupt. I've been traveling since sunrise. I only wanted to ask, is there somewhere nearby where I might rest for a little while?" Before anyone could answer, Eleanor gently stood. She smiled. "We've been expecting you." The young traveler blinked. "You have." Eleanor laughed softly. "Not you specifically, but someone." She pointed toward the empty chair. "It has been waiting all afternoon." The young woman's eyes filled with quiet surprise. She stepped inside, slowly, almost as though she feared the invitation might disappear. It didn't. Eleanor served her a warm bowl of soup, fresh bread, a cup of tea. No questions, no conditions, only welcome. The room grew even warmer, not because of the fireplace, but because another stranger no longer felt alone. Ethan looked toward Rowan. The old carpenter smiled without saying a word. He didn't need to. The lesson had already found its place. Sometimes, the strongest table is not the one with the finest food. It is the one that always leaves one chair, one plate, and one kind welcome for the person who never expected to find them. Outside, the afternoon breeze stirred the flowers on the porch. The wooden sign swayed gently. There is always room, and somehow, everyone who passed it believed those words. To be continued. Episode 13. The Carpenter Who Built Homes for Lonely Hearts. Part 5. The Door That Was Never Locked. The afternoon meal came to a peaceful end. The bowls were empty. The teapot was nearly dry. Laughter still lingered warmly around the long wooden table. No one hurried to leave. Some helped wash the dishes. Others wiped the table. The children carefully gathered crumbs for the birds waiting outside. Every small task was shared. No one was asked. Everyone simply noticed what needed doing. Ethan smiled. In every village he had visited, he had discovered a different kind of kindness. Here, kindness seemed to live quietly inside ordinary habits. As the sun drifted lower in the sky, Rowan thanked Eleanor for the meal. She placed a small cloth bundle into his hands. "Fresh rolls for tomorrow," she said. Rowan laughed. "You always send me home with more than I came with." Eleanor winked. That's how homes should work. Outside, the village glowed beneath the soft golden light of late afternoon. A gentle breeze stirred the cherry blossoms. Pink petals floated slowly through the air like tiny dancing feathers. As Ethan and Rowan walked along the quiet lane, they passed a cozy cottage unlike any other. Its front gate stood open. The flower beds were carefully tended. A wooden rocking chair rested on the porch. But what caught Ethan's attention was the front door. It stood completely open, not just slightly, wide open. Inside, No one seemed worried. Children played with carved wooden animals on the floor. An elderly man quietly read beside the fireplace. A kettle sang softly in the kitchen. Everything felt peaceful. Everything felt safe. Ethan looked toward Rowan. They leave the door open all day? The old carpenter nodded. And every night. Ethan stopped walking. Every night. Rowan smiled. Come. They stepped onto the porch. An elderly gentleman looked up from his book. His face brightened immediately. Rowan. He closed the book and stood. And who is your friend? This is Ethan. Rowan replied. Our newest traveler. The old man extended both hands warmly. I'm Samuel. Welcome. Ethan glanced once more toward the open doorway. I hope you don't mind me asking, but why is your door never locked? Samuel looked toward the doorway with gentle affection. My wife asked me that same question on the day we moved here. He chuckled softly. She thought I'd forgotten to build a lock. And had you? Samuel laughed. Oh no, I built one. It's tucked away in a drawer somewhere. Ethan smiled. You've never used it? The old man shook his head. Not once. He slowly walked to the doorway, resting one weathered hand against the wooden frame. My father taught me that a lock protects what you fear losing. He looked toward the peaceful village. But trust protects what you hope to keep. The words settled gently between them. Just then, a little boy ran up the porch steps carrying a small wooden hammer. Mr. Samuel, he called. I borrowed this yesterday. I almost forgot. Samuel accepted the tiny hammer with a smile. Thank you, Ben. The boy grinned. My mother said, returning borrowed things is another way of saying thank you. Samuel nodded. She's a wise woman. The little boy waved to Ethan before racing happily back down the lane. Ethan watched him disappear beneath the cherry trees. No one worries. He asked quietly. Samuel smiled. Of course we worry. We're human. But every morning, we choose trust again. He pointed toward the open doorway. This door reminds us that fear may keep us safe, but welcome helps us grow. A robin landed upon the porch railing. It chirped cheerfully before hopping inside the cottage. No one chased it away. The tiny bird drank from a little bowl of water beside the window, then fluttered back into the afternoon sky. Ethan laughed softly. Even the birds know they're welcome. Samuel winked. They usually arrive before the visitors do. Everyone shared a quiet laugh. Before leaving, Samuel reached into a small basket beside the door. He removed a tiny hand-carved wooden key. It was beautifully polished, though it fit no lock. He placed it gently into Ethan's palm. What does it open? Ethan asked. Samuel smiled kindly. Nothing made of wood. He paused. But perhaps it will remind you that the strongest doors are opened by trust. Ethan carefully slipped the little wooden key into his backpack. Beside the brass gear, the silver tuning fork, the bottle of golden sand, each treasure carried a lesson. Each lesson carried a little more light. As Rowan and Ethan continued walking through Hearth Glen, the open doorway slowly disappeared behind them. Yet somehow, it remained with Ethan, not as a memory of a house, but as a reminder that sometimes the safest place in the world is the one where someone has already decided to welcome you before you arrive. To be continued. Episode 13, The Carpenter Who Built Homes for Lonely Hearts. Part 6, The Tree That Remembered Every Family. The little wooden key rested safely inside Ethan's backpack. though it opened no lock. It had quietly unlocked a new understanding. Some things were protected, not by walls, but by trust. The afternoon sun drifted gently toward the western hills. Long shadows stretched across the peaceful lanes of Hearth Glen. Cherry blossoms floated lazily through the warm breeze. Some settled upon rooftops. Others landed softly beside garden paths. Rowan and Ethan continued walking at their unhurried pace. The old carpenter carried no tools, only a small canvas satchel resting comfortably over his shoulder. Ethan noticed it. "You never seem to carry many things." Rowan smiled. "I've learned something over the years." "What's that?" "The lighter your hands, the easier it is to help someone else carry theirs." The words lingered quietly between them. Soon, the cottages began to thin. The village opened into a broad, grassy meadow. At its center stood a magnificent oak tree. Its trunk was so wide that 5 grown people could not have wrapped their arms around it. Its branches stretched across the meadow like welcoming arms. Thousands of green leaves shimmered softly beneath the afternoon light. Yet what made the tree truly remarkable was what hung from its branches. Tiny wooden hearts, hundreds of them, perhaps even thousands, each one carefully carved by hand, each one tied with a simple piece of twine. The breeze stirred them gently. Tap, tap, tap. The soft wooden chimes blended into one peaceful melody. Ethan slowed his steps. "It's beautiful." Rowan nodded. "We call it the family tree." Several villagers were already gathered beneath its shade. Some sat quietly on wooden benches. Others added new wooden hearts to the lower branches. Children laughed as they searched for familiar names. Grandparents smiled while pointing toward hearts carved many years ago. Ethan stepped closer. Every wooden heart carried a name. Sometimes 2, sometimes an entire family. Some were new. They would still pale and smooth. Others had weathered through countless seasons, darkened by rain, polished by sunlight. Yet every one remained carefully protected. Ethan gently traced one with his fingertips. It read, "James and Eliza, 1898. Another nearby simply said, "Welcome home, Oliver." A smaller heart beneath it carried only one word, "Found." Ethan looked toward Rowan. "What do they mean?" The old carpenter rested his hand upon the ancient trunk. "This tree remembers. Everyone. As many as it can." He smiled softly. "When a new family begins, we carve a heart. When someone returns after many years away, we carve another. When a lonely traveler finally discovers a place to belong." He looked kindly at Ethan. "Sometimes, we carve one for them too." A little girl climbed onto a nearby bench. She proudly held a freshly carved heart. "Mr. Rowan," she called. "I finished it." Rowan walked over. "May I see?" She carefully handed it to him. The tiny heart read, "Welcome, baby Noah." A tiny carved star rested beneath the name. Rowan smiled warmly. "It's perfect." The little girl beamed. "My baby brother can't read yet, but someday he'll know he was welcomed before he even arrived." Ethan felt a quiet warmth settle inside him. Nearby, an elderly couple stood silently beneath one branch. The woman gently touched an old weathered heart. Its carving had nearly faded with time. Rowan noticed Ethan watching. "They visit every spring." He whispered, "That heart belonged to their daughter." Ethan looked at the worn carving. "Belong." The old carpenter nodded gently. She passed away many years ago. The couple smiled peacefully, not sadly. The woman brushed a fallen leaf from the little wooden hearth. Then the two of them quietly walked back toward the village. Hand in hand, Ethan remained silent. Rowan spoke softly. We don't carve these hearts to hold on to yesterday. We carve them so love always has a place to return. The breeze drifted through the great oak. Thousands of tiny wooden hearts swayed together. Tap, tap, tap. It sounded almost like gentle applause, not for anyone in particular, but for every family, every friendship, every welcome, every home. Just then, Rowan reached into his canvas satchel. He removed a small, unfinished wooden heart. Smooth, simple, blank. He placed it gently into Ethan's hands. No name. Ethan asked. Not yet. Rowan smiled. Some names arrive only after the journey does. Ethan looked at the little wooden heart. Its empty surface didn't feel unfinished. It felt full of possibility. He carefully placed it inside his backpack, beside the wooden key, the brass gear, the bottle of golden sand. Each treasure whispered the same quiet truth. A home was never simply where you live. It was where someone remembered your name, even before it was carved. As the afternoon light turned golden, the family tree continued its gentle song, its countless wooden hearts dancing softly in the breeze, waiting patiently for the stories that tomorrow would bring. To be continued. Episode 13, The Carpenter Who Built Homes for Lonely Hearts. Part 7, The House That Was Built Together. The unfinished wooden heart rested safely inside Ethan's backpack. Blank, patient, waiting, not for decoration, but for a story worthy of being carved upon it. The afternoon breeze continued to dance through the branches of the family tree. Hundreds of tiny wooden hearts swayed gently. Tap, tap, tap. Their soft melody slowly faded as Ethan and Rowan walked back toward the village. The streets of Hearth Glen were livelier now. Children carried baskets of flowers. Neighbors wheeled carts filled with freshly cut timber. Someone hummed an old folk tune while sweeping a front porch. Everyone seemed to be heading in the same direction. Ethan noticed. Is something happening? Rowan smiled. Yes. What is it? We're building a home. Ethan looked surprised. A new family has arrived? The old carpenter nodded. They will tomorrow. But we always finish the house first. They followed the cheerful stream of villagers to the edge of the village meadow. There, a small cottage was beginning to take shape. Its stone foundation had already been laid. Strong cedar beams rose proudly toward the sky. The roof frame stretched like open arms, ready to shelter whoever would one day sleep beneath it. No builders had been hired. No wages were being exchanged. Instead, the entire village had gathered. The baker carried planks of wood. The florist planted roses beneath the future windows. Children handed wooden pegs to the adults. An elderly woman stitched curtains beneath the shade of an apple tree. Even those too old to lift heavy timber found ways to help. Some prepared tea, others sharpened tools. Some simply offered encouraging smiles. Every contribution mattered. Ethan looked around in quiet amazement. Does everyone help? Rowan chuckled. In Hearth Glen, a house belongs to one family. But a home, he smiled, belongs to everyone who helped build it. A young man climbed carefully down from the roof beams. He wiped the sawdust from his hands. "Mr. Rowan, the front door is ready." Rowan nodded. "Let's see it." Leaning against a nearby workbench rested a beautifully crafted oak door. Simple, elegant, strong. Its surface carried delicate hand-carved vines winding around a single heart at the center. Ethan gently ran his fingertips across the carving. "It must have taken days." Rowan smiled. "It did. Will the family know who made it?" The old carpenter shook his head. "They'll know the village made it. They don't sign their work." "No. Why not?" Rowan rested his hand upon the smooth oak. "Because a welcome is never about the person offering it. It's about the person receiving it." The words settled quietly into Ethan's heart. Nearby, Emma proudly carried a tiny wooden birdhouse. "I made this," she announced. "It's for the garden." Rowan admired her work. "The birds will be very happy." Emma giggled. "I hope the family will be too." The villagers carefully lifted the heavy front door. One by one, hands reached forward to help. Young hands, old hands, strong hands, weathered hands, hands that had built homes for decades, hands still learning. Together, they raised the door into place. The hinges settled perfectly. Click. For a brief moment, everyone stood back. The cottage looked different now, not because it was finished, but because it finally had a way to welcome someone inside. A little applause rose gently through the meadow. Soft, warm, sincere. Then, without any signal, the villagers quietly returned to their work. There was still a chimney to finish, windows to polish, flowers to plant, a rocking chair to sand smooth. No one asked whose job belonged to whom. They simply noticed and helped. As the afternoon sunlight turned golden, an elderly woman approached carrying a woven basket. Inside were dozens of tiny handwritten notes. "What are those?" Ethan asked. "House blessings." She replied with a smile. "Every family receives one." She handed a note to each villager. One by one, they quietly tucked them into hidden places throughout the cottage. Behind a bookshelf, inside a kitchen drawer, beneath a windowsill, above a doorway, Ethan unfolded the note he had been given. It read, "May laughter visit often. May sorrow never be carried alone. May every meal taste better because it is shared. And may every person who enters this home leave believing they are loved." He folded it carefully, then slipped it beneath the wooden windowsill. No one would ever see it. Yet perhaps that was exactly where blessings belong. Hidden, quiet, faithful, as the last rays of afternoon sunlight bathed the little cottage. Rowan stood beside Ethan. "You know," he said softly, "the strongest beam in any house cannot be found." Ethan looked puzzled. "Where is it?" The old carpenter smiled. "It's the willingness of people to carry one another." The breeze stirred gently through the meadow. The unfinished cottage stood peacefully beneath the glowing sky. Already, it looked less like a building and more like a promise. To be continued. Episode 13. The Carpenter Who Built Homes for Lonely Hearts. Part 8. The Hammer That Never Built Alone. The little cottage stood peacefully beneath the golden afternoon sky. Its new oak door gleamed warmly in the sunlight. Fresh roses had already begun to frame the front path. The curtains swayed gently through the open windows. Though the family had not yet arrived, the house already felt love. Around it, the villagers continued their quiet work. Someone polished the porch railing. Children watered the flowers. A grandfather patiently sanded the edges of a small wooden bookshelf. Every task seemed ordinary, yet together, they created something extraordinary. Ethan stood beside Rowan, watching, listening, learning. His eyes followed the old carpenter as he walked to a sturdy wooden workbench. Resting upon it was an old hammer. Its oak handle had become smooth from countless years of use. The steel head carried tiny marks left by thousands of careful strikes. It wasn't shiny. It wasn't new. Yet Rowan picked it up with remarkable gentleness, almost as though greeting an old friend. "You've had that hammer for a long time," Ethan observed. Rowan smiled. "Longer than most of the houses in this village." He turned the hammer over in his hands. "My grandfather carved this handle. My father replaced the head, and I've spent 40 years holding both together." Ethan looked closely. Tiny initials had been carved near the end of the handle. "AR. What do they mean?" Rowan smiled. "My grandfather's name, Arthur Rowan. He believed every tool should remember the hands that cared for it." The afternoon breeze stirred the cedar shavings scattered across the workbench. Rowan gently rested the hammer on the wood. "You know, people often praise the carpenter." He looked toward the villagers. "But no home is ever built by one pair of hands." Just then, a young apprentice hurried over carrying a box of wooden pegs. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I measured one beam incorrectly. I'll fix it." Rowan simply smiled. "Show me." Together, they walked to the half-finished porch. The young man pointed to the beam. "It doesn't fit," he admitted. "I ruined it." Rowan ran his hand along the cedar, then looked kindly at the apprentice. "No, you learned from it." He reached for a piece of chalk with 2 gentle marks. He showed how the beam could be trimmed and used elsewhere. Nothing would be wasted. Nothing needed to be thrown away. The apprentice's shoulders relaxed. "I thought you'd be disappointed." Rowan chuckled softly. "I've made this same mistake. More than once." "You have?" "Oh, certainly." He smiled. "The difference is, I had someone patient enough to teach me." The young apprentice nodded. "I'll remember," as he returned to his work. Ethan looked thoughtfully at Rowan. "You never made him feel embarrassed." The old carpenter rested the hammer across his shoulder. "If people are afraid to make mistakes, they stop building." He paused. "And if they stop building, they stop believing they can help." The words lingered gently in the afternoon air. Nearby, Emma was carefully painting a tiny wooden sign. She held it up proudly. "What do you think?" The sign read, "Welcome home." The letters weren't perfectly straight. One flower was slightly larger than the others. Rowan admired it carefully. "It's beautiful." Emma frowned. "But I made this leaf crooked." Rowan knelt beside her. He pointed toward the nearby oak tree. "Do you see that branch?" Emma nodded. "It bends. So does the river. So does the path through the forest." He smiled warmly. "Nature is full of beautiful things that never learn to be perfectly straight." Emma smiled again. "I like my leaf now." "So do I." She carefully carried the sign toward the cottage. The afternoon slowly drifted toward evening. Golden light bathed the meadow. The villagers finished the final details. A porch swing, window boxes, a little stepping stone path leading through the garden. At last, Rowan gently placed his old hammer back onto the workbench. Ethan looked at it once more. It built so many homes. The old carpenter shook his head with a gentle smile. "No, the hammer only drove the nails. He looked around at the smiling villagers. The people built the homes. A peaceful silence settled over the meadow. The breeze whispered through the tall grass. The unfinished cottage stood quietly in the fading sunlight. Tomorrow, a new family would walk through its door. They would see the walls, the windows, the flowers, the furniture, but they might never know how many loving hands had quietly shaped every corner. And perhaps that was the greatest gift of all, to build something beautiful without asking anyone to remember your name. To be continued. Episode 13, The Carpenter Who Built Homes for Lonely Hearts. Part 9, The Family That Hadn't Arrived Yet. Morning arrived with a gentle chorus of birdsong. Soft sunlight spilled across the rooftops of Hearth Glen. Tiny drops of dew shimmered upon the rose petals beside the new cottage. The fresh cedar still carried its warm woodland scent. Today, the house would finally welcome its new family. No one knew the exact hour they would arrive. Yet the village had been awake since dawn. Not because anyone had been asked, but because everyone wanted to be ready. Ethan stepped outside Rowan's workshop. The morning air felt wonderfully fresh. He found Rowan already sweeping the wooden porch, not because it needed sweeping, but because he believed a welcome deserved care. "Good morning," Ethan said. The old carpenter smiled. "Good morning. Do they know what everyone has done for them?" Rowan rested the broom against the wall. "They know the village prepared a house." He smiled gently. "They don't know how many hearts helped build it." Together, they walked toward the little cottage. Along the way, they passed Eleanor carrying a basket of warm cinnamon rolls. "I thought the children might be hungry," she said. Nearby, Samuel carefully polished the brass doorknob one last time. Emma placed a tiny bouquet of wildflowers on the kitchen table. Harold, the village gardener, watered the roses beside the front gate. Every person quietly added one final touch. No one spoke about being thanked. The work itself was enough. As the morning sun climbed higher, a distant sound echoed from beyond the forest road. Plop, plop, plop. A small horse-drawn wagon slowly appeared between the tall pine trees. The entire village grew wonderfully still. No one rushed forward. No one crowded the road. They simply waited, with peaceful smiles. The wagon rolled gently into Hearth Glen. It was old, weathered. Its wooden sides carried the marks of many long journeys. A little girl peeked out from beneath a wool blanket. Her eyes grew wide as she looked at the flower-filled village. Beside her sat a young boy holding a small stuffed rabbit made from faded cloth. Their parents climbed down slowly. The father looked tired. The mother held the youngest child close against her shoulder. For a long moment, they simply looked around, almost as though they couldn't quite believe what they were seeing. Rowan stepped forward first, not with a speech, not with grand gestures, only a warm smile. "Welcome," he said softly. "We've been looking forward to meeting you." The father blinked in surprise. "You knew we were coming?" Rowan chuckled. "We knew someone would." The villagers smiled gently. Emma stepped forward with the bouquet of wildflowers. "These are for your table." The little girl accepted them shyly. "They're beautiful." Samuel offered the father a small wooden toolbox. Every home deserves someone who knows how to care for it. Eleanor handed the mother the basket of warm rolls. "You shouldn't have to cook on your first day." The mother's eyes quietly filled with tears. I don't know what to say." Eleanor gently squeezed her hand. You don't have to say anything. You're home. Those two simple words drifted through the morning air. You're home. The father lowered his eyes. For several quiet moments, he said nothing. Then, almost in a whisper, we've spent 3 years moving from place to place. We stopped unpacking our boxes because we never stayed long. He looked toward the little cottage waiting beneath the cherry trees. I don't think our children remember what it feels like to belong somewhere. Rowan rested one gentle hand upon his shoulder. Then perhaps today won't simply be the day you move into a house. He smiled warmly. Perhaps it will be the day your children begin calling somewhere home. The little boy holding the stuffed rabbit looked toward Ethan. Can I ask you something? Of course. The boy pointed toward the wooden swing hanging from the front porch. Is that really for us? Ethan smiled. It has been waiting for you. The boy's face lit up with the brightest smile Ethan had seen all morning. He ran toward the porch. His sister followed close behind. Within moments, laughter filled the little garden. The swing moved gently back and forth. The roses swayed in the breeze. The house, which had stood quietly waiting only yesterday, finally sounded like a home. Ethan looked around the gathering. No ribbon had been cut. No speeches had been given. Yet everyone somehow understood. They had witnessed something beautiful. Not the opening of a building, but the beginning of a belonging. As Rowan quietly watched the children laughing on the porch, he whispered so softly that only Ethan could hear. A carpenter can build walls. He smiled, but only welcome can build a family. The morning breeze drifted gently through Hearth Glen. The front door of the little cottage remained wide open, not because someone had forgotten to close it, but because every home should always leave room for one more heart. To be continued. Episode 13. The Carpenter Who Built Homes for Lonely Hearts. Part 10. The Housewarming That Needed No Gifts. The little cottage glowed beneath the gentle afternoon sun. Laughter drifted through its open windows. The porch swing moved slowly in the breeze. Inside, the children's footsteps echoed happily across the polished wooden floors. The little girl carefully placed Emma's wildflowers into a glass vase. Her younger brother ran from room to room, stopping only to announce, "This one has a window, and this one too." Their parents stood quietly in the doorway, watching, smiling. Neither of them spoke. Sometimes, joy arrives so gently that words only get in the way. Outside, the villagers gathered beneath the old maple tree beside the cottage. Long wooden tables had been placed together beneath strings of small lanterns. Fresh bread, vegetable soup, berry pies, honey, cheese, roasted vegetables, apple cider. Every family had brought something. No one knew who had prepared the most. No one cared. Everything belonged to everyone. Ethan looked around. "It's a housewarming." Rowan nodded. "It is." But Ethan noticed something unusual. No one brought presents. The old carpenter smiled knowingly. "We did." Ethan looked puzzled. "I don't see any." "You will. Soon." Everyone found a place around the long table. The newest family sat near the center, still looking a little overwhelmed, still unsure how to thank so many people. Rowan stood. He held no speech in his hands, no written notes, only a peaceful smile. "My friends," he began softly, "today we celebrate something much greater than a new roof." He looked toward the family. "We celebrate the beginning. of new memories. The villagers nodded quietly. Then, instead of placing wrapped gifts upon the table, each person stepped forward one by one, not carrying boxes, but offering promises. Samuel smiled warmly. If a shelf ever becomes loose, I'll repair it, without charge, without being asked. Eleanor laughed gently. If your kitchen is ever empty, my oven won't be. Emma held up a tiny watering can. I'll help your flowers grow. The village teacher adjusted his glasses. If your children ever need help reading, my classroom door is always open. The shepherd smiled. If winter is difficult, I'll share firewood. The baker raised a warm loaf of bread. If you ever smell fresh bread in the morning, expect someone to knock on your door. One after another, the villagers continued, not promising perfection, only presents, not offering possessions, but themselves. The father looked around the table. His eyes glistened. I've never received gifts like these. Rowan smiled. They last longer. The mother gently wiped away a quiet tear. We kept wondering how we could ever repay all of you. Eleanor reached across the table and squeezed her hand. One day, you'll welcome someone else. That's enough. The little girl looked thoughtfully at her parents. So, when another family comes, we'll help too. Rowan's eyes sparkled. Exactly. She smiled proudly. I like that kind of present. Soft laughter spread around the table. As the meal continued, stories replaced speeches. Children played tag beneath the cherry trees. Neighbors shared old recipes. Someone quietly tuned a fiddle. A gentle melody floated through the evening air. Ethan watched everything unfold. No one was trying to impress anyone. No one compared what they had brought. No one counted who had done more. Everyone simply gave what they could. As twilight slowly settled over Hearth Glen, small lanterns began glowing above the tables. Golden light danced across smiling faces. The new family looked different now, not because their clothes had changed, not because they owned more, but because the uncertainty they had carried into the village had quietly been replaced by belonging. Rowan leaned toward Ethan. My grandfather once told me, a house becomes warm because of a fireplace. He paused. But a home becomes warm because people keep showing up. Ethan looked around the glowing tables, the shared meal, the laughter, the quiet promises, the open doors, the helping hands. He finally understood. The greatest housewarming gift could never be wrapped. It was knowing that if tomorrow became difficult, you would never have to face it alone. Above the village, the first evening stars appeared one by one, and beneath their gentle light, Hearth Glen continued building something no carpenter could ever finish. A community where every heart helped carry another. To be continued. Episode 13, The Carpenter Who Built Homes for Lonely Hearts. Part 11, The Blueprint Hidden Beneath the Floor. Morning arrived softly over Hearth Glen. A thin veil of mist rested upon the meadows. The cottages glowed with the warm light of sunrise. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster greeted the day. Children laughed as they chased butterflies through the gardens. The new family's cottage no longer looked unfamiliar. The flower boxes had already begun to fill with fresh blooms. The porch swing moved gently in the morning breeze. A pair of bluebirds had discovered Emma's little birdhouse. Home, it seemed, was already settling in. Ethan stepped outside Rowan's workshop just as the old carpenter was fastening his leather apron. In his hand was the faithful hammer that had served 3 generations. "Good morning," Ethan said. Rowan smiled. "I have one more place I'd like to show you." Together, they walked toward the newly finished cottage. The family was still asleep after the joyful celebration the night before. The village remained respectfully quiet. Rowan unlocked nothing. Instead, he gently pushed the front door open. It welcomed them with its familiar creak. Inside, morning sunlight spilled across the polished wooden floor. The rooms were peaceful. The scent of fresh cedar still lingered in the air. Rowan knelt beside the fireplace. He carefully lifted one smooth floorboard. Hidden beneath it rested a small cedar box. Its corners were worn with age. Its brass hinges had darkened over many years. Ethan watched curiously. "I didn't know this was here." "Most people don't," Rowan replied. He opened the little box. Inside lay a single rolled parchment tied with a faded blue ribbon. Beside it rested a carpenter's pencil, no longer than Ethan's little finger. Rowan untied the ribbon with great care. The parchment crackled softly as it unfolded. Ethan expected to see measurements, angles, wood types, building plans. Instead, the page was almost empty. Only a simple sketch of a little cottage appeared in one corner. Beneath it were a few handwritten lines. The ink had faded slightly with time. Rowan smiled. "My grandfather wrote this." He handed the parchment to Ethan. It read, "Build the roof strong enough to shelter from rain. Build the walls sturdy enough to withstand the wind. But remember, neither roof nor wall will ever make this place a home. Only the people who forgive, who listen, who laugh together, and who leave the light on for one another will finish the house you have begun." The room became wonderfully still. Only the gentle ticking of a nearby clock could be heard. Ethan read the words again. "They're not instructions for building." Rowan shook his head gently. "No, they're instructions for living." He carefully rolled the parchment once more. "My grandfather believed every house deserved to remember why it was built." He returned the blueprint to the cedar box, then placed the tiny carpenter's pencil beside it. "It has stayed here for nearly 70 years." Ethan looked surprised. "Every house in Hearth Glen has one." Rowan nodded. "Every single one. When a new home is finished, we place a copy beneath the floor. So the foundation always rests upon something greater than wood." Just then, soft footsteps echoed from the hallway. The little boy from the new family rubbed his sleepy eyes. He stopped when he saw Rowan. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know anyone was here." Rowan smiled warmly. "We were just saying good morning to the house." The boy tilted his head. "Houses wake up." The old carpenter chuckled. "I think they do. Every time someone fills them with kindness." The little boy walked over. He looked at the open cedar box. "What's inside?" "A promise," Rowan answered. The boy thought for a moment. "Can I make one too?" "Of course. What kind of promise?" The little boy looked around the room, then smiled. "I promise to never let anyone eat dinner alone, if I can help it." Rowan's eyes softened. "That's a beautiful promise." Ethan smiled. "So this house already has 2 blueprints." The old carpenter looked toward the little boy. "Perhaps the second one is even more important." Outside, the morning breeze stirred the wind chimes hanging beneath the porch roof. Their gentle melody drifted through the open doorway. The cottage stood quietly beneath the brightening sky. Its beams were strong, Its roof was sturdy. Its windows welcomed the light. But hidden beneath its floor rested something no visitor would ever see. A reminder that the greatest homes are not built only with careful hands. They are built with faithful hearts. To be continued. Episode 13. The Carpenter Who Built Homes for Lonely Hearts. Part 12. The Porch Light That Never Went Out. Evening settled gently over Hearth Glen. The last golden rays of sunlight disappeared behind the pine-covered hills. One by one, warm lights began glowing inside the cottages. Some flickered from fireplaces. Others shone softly through lanterns placed beside open windows. The village became wonderfully quiet. Not silent, just peaceful. The distant chirping of crickets blended with the rustling leaves. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime sang softly. Clink, clink, clink. Ethan stood outside Rowan's workshop. The old carpenter was carefully cleaning his tools before placing each one back into its proper place. Every chisel, every plane, every saw, every hammer, nothing was put away carelessly. You treat your tools like old friends. Ethan observed. Rowan smiled. They've carried my hands through many years. He closed the wooden toolbox. And gratitude should never depend on whether something can speak. Just then, he picked up a small brass lantern resting on a shelf near the doorway. It wasn't large. Its glass had tiny scratches. Its wooden handle had darkened with age. Yet the lantern had been polished until it glowed warmly in the fading light. Come, Rowan said. I'd like to show you my favorite tradition. Together, they walked through the quiet village. Families gathered on porches after supper. Children listened as grandparents shared old stories. Neighbors exchanged gentle waves. No one seemed eager to hurry indoors. When they reached the edge of the village, they stopped before a tiny cottage standing alone beneath a great maple tree. A single lantern hung beside its front door. Its golden flame already burned brightly, though no one appeared to be home. Ethan looked around. Who lives here? No one. Rowan answered softly. Ethan blinked. No one. The old carpenter nodded. It has been empty for many years. Then, why is the lantern lit? Rowan stepped onto the porch. He carefully adjusted the little flame inside the lantern. My grandmother began this tradition. He said, many winters ago, a traveler lost his way during a terrible snowstorm. He wandered for hours, cold, frightened, and certain he wouldn't survive the night. The breeze whispered gently through the maple leaves. My grandmother placed a lantern outside this empty cottage, not because anyone lived here, but because she believed someone might need to know that hope was still awake. Ethan gazed at the warm light. It helped him. Rowan smiled. It did. The traveler found the lantern. He rested here until morning. And when spring arrived, he returned, not to repay the kindness, but to light the lantern for someone else. The gentle flame danced behind the old glass. Steady, faithful, patient. Just then, a teenage girl arrived carrying a small bottle of lamp oil. Without a word, she carefully refilled the lantern. Then she smiled at Rowan. My turn tonight. Rowan nodded proudly. Thank you, Clara. Clara turned to Ethan. Everyone in Hearth Glen takes a turn. No one owns the lantern. We simply make sure it never goes out. She placed the bottle back into her basket and quietly walked home. The little flame continued to glow. Ethan couldn't take his eyes off it. So every night, someone remembers? Rowan looked toward the distant forest path. Yes, because we never know who may be walking through the darkness. A long silence settled between them, comfortable, thoughtful. Finally, Ethan asked, "Has anyone needed it recently?" Rowan smiled gently. Last autumn, a young woman became lost after sunset. She told us later she almost gave up walking. But then, she saw this little light through the trees. Ethan looked once more at the lantern. It wasn't bright enough to illuminate the whole forest. It didn't need to be. It only needed to shine far enough for one tired traveler to take the next step. Rowan rested a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "My grandfather used to tell me, never worry if your light seems small." He looked at the glowing lantern. To someone searching in the darkness, even a single window can look like sunrise. The words lingered quietly in the cool evening air. Above them, the first stars appeared one by one. Below them, the little porch lantern continued to burn. Not for praise, not for recognition, simply because somewhere, someone might still be on their way home. Ethan smiled, then reached into his backpack. He gently touched the tiny wooden key, the unfinished heart, the silver tuning fork, the brass gear. Each treasure reminded him of a different lesson. Tonight, he realized another one had quietly joined them. The greatest lights are often the ones that wait faithfully for people they have never met. To be continued. Episode 13. The Carpenter Who Built Homes for Lonely Hearts. Part 13. The door left open for tomorrow. Morning arrived wrapped in a gentle silver mist. The rooftops of Hearth Glen shimmered with tiny drops of dew. Smoke curled lazily from stone chimneys. Somewhere nearby, a blackbird welcomed the new day with a cheerful song. Ethan stepped outside Rowan's workshop. The air smelled of cedar, fresh bread, and rain-soaked earth. The village was already awake, yet no one seemed hurried. An elderly woman swept her front porch while humming softly. Children carried baskets of apples to their neighbors. A young couple repaired an old fence together. Each small act seemed to whisper the same quiet message. Someone belongs here. Rowan emerged from the workshop carrying a simple wooden box. It wasn't large. Its smooth oak lid bore a single carved word. Tomorrow. Ethan tilted his head. What's inside? Rowan smiled. Come and see. Together, they walked to the edge of the village where a small cottage overlooked the rolling hills. Unlike the others, its garden was tidy. Its windows sparkled in the morning light. But the cottage was empty. No smoke rose from its chimney. No voices echoed from within. The front door stood slightly open, just enough for the breeze to move it gently. Creak, creak, creak. Ethan looked around. Does anyone live here? Not yet, Rowan replied. He set the wooden box on the porch, then slowly opened it. Inside rested several carefully folded quilts, a loaf of fresh bread wrapped in linen, a small jar of wildflower honey, a handmade candle, a tiny wooden toy horse, and a handwritten note tied with blue ribbon. Ethan picked up the note. It read, "If today has been difficult, may tomorrow greet you gently. Everything inside this home has been waiting for you. Take what you need. Leave only hope behind." Ethan looked at Rowan. Who was this for? The old carpenter gazed toward the distant forest road. We don't know, and yet, we prepare it anyway. He smiled softly. My grandmother called this the house for tomorrow. When someone writes to the village, saying they're searching for a new beginning, we quietly prepare this cottage. Sometimes they arrive tomorrow, sometimes next month, sometimes, he paused, they never arrive at all. Ethan looked surprised. And if they don't, Rowan shrugged gently. Then another traveler will. The breeze carried the scent of lavender through the open doorway. The cottage felt peaceful, as though it already trusted whoever would someday step across its threshold. Just then, Emma came walking up the little stone path. She carried a freshly painted flower pot. "I made this," she announced proudly. The pot wasn't perfectly round. Tiny brushstrokes wandered beyond the painted daisies, but its cheerful colors made Ethan smile. Rowan admired it carefully. "It's beautiful." Emma placed it beside the front door, so whoever comes won't arrive to an empty porch. She looked toward Ethan. "My mother says, hope should be the first thing someone sees." Ethan nodded. "I think she's right." Emma smiled brightly before skipping back toward the village square. For a while, neither Ethan nor Rowan spoke. The only sounds were birds singing, leaves rustling, and the gentle creak of the half-open door. Finally, Ethan asked, "Why leave the door open?" Rowan rested one hand upon the weathered frame. "So the house never forgets that it's expecting someone." He looked across the valley where the forest path disappeared into the distance. "A closed door says, no one is coming, but an open one whispers, take your time, we'll still be here." The words settled quietly into Ethan's heart. He thought of the lighthouse whose beacon never stopped turning, the violin that found its song again, the clockmaker who treasured forgotten hours, and now, a village that believed tomorrow deserved to be welcomed before it arrived. As they prepared to leave, Ethan turned back one last time. The little cottage stood peacefully beneath the morning sky. Its open door swayed gently in the breeze. Its porch waited patiently. Its table stood ready. Its lantern rested beside the window. Everything inside whispered the same quiet promise. Whenever your journey finally brings you here, you will not be arriving too late. You will simply be arriving home. To be continued. Episode 13. The Carpenter Who Built Homes for Lonely Hearts. Part 14. The House That Thanked Its Builders. The morning sun climbed gently above the pine-covered hills. Its golden light spilled across the rooftops of Hearth Glen. The village stirred with its familiar rhythm. A baker opened his windows to let the scent of fresh bread drift into the street. Children laughed as they carried buckets of water to the community garden. Somewhere nearby, a carpenter's saw sang softly through a piece of cedar. Shoo, shoo, shoo. Ethan and Rowan made their way back toward the little cottage that had welcomed its new family only a day before. The roses beside the front path had opened a little wider. The porch swing swayed gently in the breeze. The windows were open. From inside came the sound of cheerful laughter. The house already felt alive. As they approached, the front door opened. The father stepped outside. His face looked different now. The weariness Ethan had first noticed had begun to fade. In its place, there was peace. "Mr. Rowan," he said warmly. "Ethan, I'm so glad you're here." He held the door open. "Please come in." Inside, the cottage had changed in small but meaningful ways. The children's drawings now decorated one wall. A knitted blanket rested across the rocking chair. The vase of wildflowers still brightened the kitchen table. The scent of cinnamon and fresh tea filled the air. The little house no longer felt like a new building. It felt like a family story had already begun. The mother welcomed them with a gentle smile. "We've been working on something," she said. The children disappeared into the next room. A moment later, they returned carrying a carefully wrapped wooden board. Emma followed close behind, grinning from ear to ear. "We all helped," she whispered proudly. The family placed the wooden board on the table. Slowly, the father unfolded the soft linen cloth that covered it. It was a beautifully carved plaque. Simple, elegant. At its center, a large oak tree spread its branches wide. Beneath the tree stood many small figures holding hands. At the bottom, one sentence had been carved with remarkable care. "A house is built with hands. A home is built with hearts." Rowan became very quiet. His fingers gently traced the carved letters. "You made this?" The father nodded. "We all did." He smiled toward his children. "The carving isn't perfect. The lettering is uneven. But every one of us wanted to leave a little piece of ourselves inside this home." The little boy stepped forward shyly. "I carved a tiny bird." He pointed toward one corner. "It looks a little funny." Rowan laughed softly. "I think it looks happy." The little girl smiled. "I painted the leaves." Emma proudly added, "And I helped choose the colors." Everyone laughed together. The room filled with a warmth no fireplace could create. The mother looked toward Rowan. "We've spent years living in places that never really felt ours." She paused. "But yesterday, you didn't simply give us a house. You gave us the courage to believe we could belong again." For a moment, no one spoke. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of gratitude. Finally, Rowan looked around the room. His eyes rested on the children, the flowers, the drawings, the well-loved table. Then he smiled. "My grandfather used to say, 'You'll know a house has become a home when it begins giving something back to the people who built it.'" Ethan looked around. The old carpenter was right. The walls now echoed with laughter. The windows welcomed morning light. The porch invited neighbors to sit for a while. The kitchen gathered people together. The house had already begun returning every kindness it had received. Before leaving, the family carried the carved plaque outside. Together, they hung it beside the front door, not to impress visitors, but to remind themselves, every single day, what truly held their home together. As Ethan and Rowan walked slowly back toward the village, the breeze gently stirred the wind chimes hanging beneath the porch roof. Their peaceful melody followed them down the lane. Clink, clink, clink. Ethan looked back one final time. The little cottage seemed to glow beneath the afternoon sun, not because it was newly built, but because it had already learned the quiet secret every true home eventually discovers. When kindness is given freely, the walls begin to remember, and before long, the home itself starts thanking the hearts that built it. To be continued. Episode 13. The Carpenter Who Built Homes for Lonely Hearts. Part 15. The Key That Opened Every Home. The final evening of Ethan's stay in Hearth Glen arrived with quiet grace. The western sky glowed with shades of amber, rose, and soft violet. A cool breeze wandered through the village streets. Cherry blossoms drifted gently across the stone paths. Some settled beneath benches. Others rested beside flower gardens. Everywhere Ethan looked, life moved with its familiar, peaceful rhythm. Children laughed as they played beneath the family tree. Neighbors sat together on front porches, sharing stories as lanterns slowly came to life. The little cottage welcomed its new family with warm light shining through every window. It no longer looked like the newest house in the village. It looked as though it had always belonged. Ethan stood outside Rowan's workshop. The old carpenter was closing the wooden shutters one by one. When he finished, he reached beneath his workbench. Carefully, he lifted a small cedar chest. Its brass corners had been polished smooth by many years of loving hands. Without speaking, Rowan carried it outside. They walked together toward the center of Hearth Glen. The family tree stood quietly beneath the evening sky. Its countless wooden hearts swayed gently in the breeze. Tap, tap, tap. The familiar melody felt almost like a heartbeat. Several villagers had already gathered beneath its branches. Samuel, Eleanor, Emma, Clara, the village teacher, the baker, the shepherd, the young apprentice, and the family who had arrived only yesterday. Everyone smiled as Ethan approached. No grand ceremony had been planned. No decorations filled the meadow. Only friends. Only gratitude. Rowan placed the cedar chest upon a small wooden table. He slowly opened the lid. Inside rested dozens of beautifully carved wooden keys. Each one was unique. Some were made from oak, others from walnut. Some carried tiny carved flowers. Others bore stars, birds, or winding vines. Ethan looked curiously at them. They're beautiful. They are, Rowan replied, but none of them opens a lock. Ethan smiled. I've heard that before. The old carpenter laughed softly. Yes, but these have a different purpose. He picked up a simple maple key. Its surface was smooth and warm. Across its handle, delicate letters had been carved. Welcome begins with you. Rowan placed it gently into Ethan's hands. This is the key of Hearth Glen. Ethan turned it over carefully. It doesn't belong to the village. Rowan shook his head. No, it belongs to anyone who chooses to make another person feel at home. The evening breeze stirred the branches above them. The wooden hearts answered with their quiet song. Tap, tap, tap. Emma stepped forward carrying the unfinished wooden heart Rowan had given Ethan beneath the great oak. It isn't unfinished anymore, she said with a bright smile. Ethan looked at it in surprise. Carefully carved into its smooth surface were 3 simple words. You belong here. Beneath them, a tiny house rested beneath the branches of an oak tree. Emma looked down shyly. I asked everyone what Hearth Glen should say to every traveler. They all gave different answers. She smiled, but somehow they all meant the same thing. Ethan felt the smooth carving beneath his fingertips. It wasn't elaborate. It didn't need to be. Sometimes, the simplest words carry the deepest comfort. Samuel stepped forward next. He handed Ethan a tiny pouch made from soft linen. Inside rested a handful of cedar seeds. Plant these wherever life carries you, he said. Not every seed will become a tree, but every act of kindness gives someone a place to grow. Eleanor smiled and tucked a small recipe card into Ethan's journal. Across the top, she had written, bread shared is bread multiplied. On the back, she had added one final note. If you ever bake this for a stranger, asterisk, our table becomes a little larger. Asterisk. Everyone laughed gently. The sky deepened into twilight. One by one, lanterns around the village began to glow. Golden light flickered beneath the branches of the family tree. Rowan looked toward Ethan. "My grandfather once told me something," he said quietly. "I've carried it ever since." Ethan listened. The old carpenter spoke slowly. As though each word had been shaped with the same care, he gave every piece of wood. Build houses with your hands. Build friendships with your time. Build hope with your kindness. And wherever life asks you to live, leave behind a place that feels more like home. Because you were there, the meadow grew wonderfully still. Even the breeze seemed to pause. Ethan carefully placed the key of Hearth Glen, the carved wooden heart, the cedar seeds, and Eleanor's recipe card inside his backpack. Each treasure joined the others from every journey. None of them were valuable because of what they were made from. They were valuable because of what they reminded him to become. He looked around at the smiling faces gathered beneath the ancient oak. Then he quietly realized, some gifts are not meant to open doors. They are meant to open people. To be continued. Episode 13. The Carpenter Who Built Homes for Lonely Hearts. Part 16. Finale. The first light of dawn spread gently across Hearth Glen. Morning mist rested softly over the meadows. Tiny drops of dew shimmered upon every blade of grass. The cottages glowed beneath the golden sky. Smoke rose lazily from familiar chimneys. Birdsong drifted through the quiet village. It was time. Ethan stood outside Rowan's workshop with his backpack resting comfortably on his shoulders. Inside, the quiet treasures from every journey traveled with him once again. The smooth river stone, the white seashell, the pressed lavender blossom, the tiny wooden windmill, the bottle of spring water, the cedar bookmark engraved with. Walk gently, listen deeply. The bronze key of quiet hearts, the morning bell, the silver bell bracelet, the golden ribbon, the wooden tree token, the journey bundle, the wildflower seed, the compass that pointed toward kindness, the blue sea glass, the amber sea glass, the bottle of white sand, Sophie's little paper boat, Captain's white feather, the silver compass that pointed to the center, Grace's lavender, the letter hidden inside the violin, the smooth maple wood, Oliver's notebook, the silver tuning fork engraved with. Find the note that brings peace, the old violin, the brass pocket sundial, the embroidered linen, the tiny bottle of golden sand, the notebook that remembered meaningful hours, the little brass gear, Lily's paper clock, the tiny wooden key that opened no lock, the unfinished heart that now proudly read, "You belong here," the cedar seeds, Eleanor's recipe card, the key of Hearth Glen engraved with. Welcome begins with you. None of them could build a house, but together, they had quietly built something inside the traveler who carried them. Outside, the villagers had already gathered. Samuel, Eleanor, Emma, Clara, the young apprentice, the baker, the shepherd, the teacher, the new family, and finally, Rowan. No one spoke at first. Some farewells are too meaningful to rush. The morning breeze stirred the branches of the family tree. Hundreds of tiny wooden hearts answered softly. Tap, tap, tap. Their familiar melody echoed across the meadow. Emma stepped forward first. She held a tiny clay flower pot in both hands. Inside, a young cedar sapling stood only a few inches tall. I planted one of Samuel's seeds, she said proudly. So wherever you stop someday, you'll already have a little forest waiting. Ethan accepted the small pot with a grateful smile. "I'll take good care of it." "I know you will." Samuel stepped forward next. He placed a small folded piece of sandpaper into Ethan's hand. Ethan looked surprised. "It's only sandpaper." Samuel smiled. "Exactly. The world doesn't always need someone to build something new. Sometimes, it simply needs someone willing to smooth a rough edge." Ethan nodded quietly. "I'll remember." Eleanor embraced him gently, then slipped a warm loaf of bread into his backpack. She smiled. "In case you meet someone who's hungry, before you meet your next destination." Everyone laughed softly, even Rowan. At last, the old carpenter stepped forward. In his hands rested the worn hammer that had belonged to 3 generations. For one quiet moment, Ethan wondered if Rowan intended to give it to him. Instead, the old carpenter rested the hammer against the trunk of the family tree. "It belongs here," he said softly, "so every young carpenter who comes after me will remember that no one builds alone." He turned toward Ethan. "My grandfather left me one final lesson. I've been saving it until the right traveler arrived." The morning breeze became wonderfully still. The village listened. Even the birds seemed to pause upon the branches. Rowan spoke slowly, clearly. Every word carried the quiet strength of generations. "May every house you enter become warmer because you arrived. May every table you share leave someone feeling less alone. May every road you travel lead not only to new places, but to new people you can call family. And whenever you cannot build a home, may you always help someone feel at home." Silence settled across Hearth Glen. Not empty, not sorrowful, only full. Ethan lowered his eyes. He realized the greatest gift Rowan had given him wasn't made from cedar, or oak, or careful craftsmanship. It was the understanding that home is not a place waiting at the end of a journey. Home is something we quietly create every time we welcome another heart. He looked once more at the village, at the open doors, the waiting chair, the family tree, the little cottage filled with laughter, the lantern that never went out, the house prepared for tomorrow. Everything stood exactly as it had before. Nothing had changed, except the traveler. Ethan smiled. He stepped through the simple wooden gate at the edge of Hearth Glen. Beyond it, the forest path curved gently between towering pines. Sunlight filtered through the branches like streams of gold. Far ahead, beyond the trees, a wide river shimmered beneath the morning sky. Its gentle current carried something unusual. Dozens of tiny paper lanterns floated peacefully upon the water. Each one glowed with a soft golden light. The breeze carried a sound Ethan had never heard before. Not a hammer, not a violin, not a clock, not the sea. It was laughter, gentle, hopeful, as though many strangers had somehow become lifelong friends around a distant riverside fire. Ethan paused, closed his eyes, and listened. A peaceful smile appeared upon his face. Some homes are built with timber, others are built with time, but the strongest homes of all are built, one welcome at a time. He adjusted his backpack, turned toward the river, and quietly continued walking toward another story waiting to be shared. To be continued. Next journey, episode 14, the boat builder who carried dreams across the river. Some rivers separate places, but a kind heart can always build a bridge between people. Thank you for walking beside Ethan once again. May your home always have an open door your table always have room for one more, and your heart always become a place where others feel they belong. Until our next journey, travel gently, build kindly, and rest peacefully. Full Sleep Stories on Golden Haven. Subscribe for peaceful nights.